California to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered as base text for the purposes of amendment. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, in response to the ranking member who wants to conflate this bill with previous laws that the Supreme Court have held unconstitutional, simply it's not the case. This bill does not command law enforcement officers to do anything or take part in any federal activity, such as conducting background checks as in Prince versus the United States. It does not compel them to enact or enforce a federal regulatory program, such as taking title of nuclear waste as in New York versus United States. And it does not dictate what a state legislature may and may not do, such as prohibiting state authorization of sporting gambling, as was clear in Murphy versus National Collegiate Athletic Association. This bill does not issue an order directly to state and local jurisdictions. Instead, the bill simply says that if you restrict or prohibit the federal government from doing its job to enforce federal immigration law, you cannot receive related federal grant funding. There's no compulsion, no command, no commandeering. In fact, it is sanctuary states and cities that want to commandeer federal law by undermining the federal government's immigration enforcement every step of the way. This bill's careful structure is permissible under Supreme Court precedent, and I urge my colleagues to reject this false argument. And now to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. It simply makes a small technical change to the short title and clarifies that sanctuary city victims or their families may pursue a civil action against jurisdictions for harm that occurred before the enactment of this act. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been 1 month since we saw DHS officials kill 2 people in cold blood in Minnesota. We've seen countless U.S. citizens detained and beaten for exercising their First Amendment rights. We've seen ICE agents break down doors of U.S. citizens without a warrant in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And we just found out ICE agents admitted to killing another U.S. citizen in San Antonio last year. But instead of addressing these egregious abuses or making sure that every federal officer acts in accordance with the Fourth Amendment, we're taking up this bill to force every single state and local law enforcement agency to act as immigration agents. And let's be clear, that is what we're doing by withholding these federal funds if you don't like the policies that state legislatures implement. And let's be clear, this bill is an even more radical version of the bill the majority moved 9 years ago. Republicans passed their big bad betrayal bill, giving DHS $175 billion to conduct immigration enforcement. DHS has plenty of money to hire all the new immigration enforcement agents they want, but Republicans now want to force state and local authorities to join them in their lawless actions. So let's talk about what this bill does, because this is not merely about allowing cooperation. This bill would coerce state and local law enforcement to help them round up immigrants by threatening to cut off law enforcement funds if they do not comply, even though multiple courts have held that this is illegal, and numerous research studies and law enforcement officials have confirmed that keeping the long-standing distinction between federal immigration and local law enforcement helps keep communities safer. Moreover, detainers raise serious concerns as they are not orders from judges, and they often don't have sufficient probable cause. They are simply requests for local law enforcement agencies to hold individuals in custody for up to 48 hours. And this is not necessarily for people who have a final order of removal, as Republicans on the other side stated during the Kristi Noem hearing yesterday. In fact, that's often not the case at all. Detainers have been issued for U.S. citizens, including one U.S. citizen who was detained for 1,273 days. Ultimately, adopting welcoming policies and refusing to comply with detainers protects local law enforcement from being held liable for unlawful arrests and detention. Immigration enforcement is the job of the federal government, not states, not cities, not localities. There are many reasons that law enforcement themselves choose not to enforce immigration law. In 2019, my home state of Washington passed the Keep Washington Working Act with bipartisan support. It is a common sense law to ensure that local police remain focused on public safety rather than enforcing federal immigration law. We know that when local police act as immigration agents, immigrant communities and their families are much less likely to come forward to report a crime when they are a witness or even a victim. It destroys the trust that police rely on to preserve public safety in communities. And courts have ruled multiple times that states have the right to enact laws like Keep Washington Working Act. Our law does allow information sharing with the federal government when necessary for an ongoing criminal investigation or pursuant to a court order or a judicial warrant. That is how we as a state decided to handle immigration enforcement, because we wanted to ensure that our limited resources went to protecting our citizens, not rounding up students, fathers, mothers, kids, and law-abiding community members. And I fully support my state's effort to ensure that everyone in our state follows our law. Now, we're not alone. Many states like California, New Jersey, Oregon, Illinois, and Colorado have made similar choices. And I would like to point out that no law enforcement organizations support this legislation. That is because organizations like the Major Cities Chiefs Association has repeatedly reaffirmed that across the country, if law enforcement officers are viewed by members of the immigrant community as colluding or working with immigration law enforcement officers, this would result in increased crime against immigrants. This is a quote, result in increased crime against immigrants in the broader community, create a class of silent victims, and eliminate the potential for assistance from immigrants in solving crimes or preventing future terroristic attacks. Now, we already have a problem with how people are seeing ICE and CBP in this country. There is very little support across the country for what this administration is doing. Now you want to make it worse by forcing local jurisdictions and states to enforce federal immigration laws that honestly bring liability on local police departments. That's why so many local police departments don't want to do this, because they don't want to absorb the liability that exists. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to emphasize that all this bill does is it makes sure that local jurisdictions cannot shield the truly bad hombres from deportation, who need to be deported. They have no business in our country. Zero. I'm an old sheriff. I'm with you all. This right here is what I mean by bad hombres, right? Here we have a few that ICE picked up in and around my district. Jose from Mexico, arrested Harris County, practiced dentistry without a license, sexually assaulted one of his patients. This guy right here. Juan from Mexico, arrested in my county, Fort Bend County, indecency with a child. Here he is. Jose, he's from Ecuador, arrested in Katy, Texas, assault and larceny. Juan Garcia, Mexico, arrested in Harris County, assault on a family member by strangulation. Would you like to have him in your family? Look at this guy. Carlos from Honduras, arrested in Harris County, sexual assault of a child. We know the Republican Party, we want to protect the American people. That's what Donald Trump wants to do, protect the American people from these bad hombres. They want to let them in. It's quite clear. We know who wants to let these guys in. Thang Lee from Vietnam, arrested in Katy. A lot of forgery. You sheriffs know what I'm talking about, dealing with all the forgery we have. Anyone that does not support this bill thinks these types of people, these individuals, should be allowed to remain in our country and continue to prey on the American people. It is stupidity at its core. Donald Trump now has to clean up the mess. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized.